The letter that arrived 20 years late. Sophia had always wondered what happened to her first love, James. One rainy afternoon, she received an old, yellowed envelope in the mail, postmarked 2 decades earlier. Inside was a letter from James, written the night before he disappeared. As she read his words, her world shattered. James had written about a secret he had uncovered, something dangerous that forced him to leave. He had begged her to meet him at their favorite spot by the old lighthouse, but the letter had never arrived. Now, 20 years later, Sophia was left with nothing but questions. Determined to uncover the truth, she embarks on a journey that leads her back to their hometown. She visits old places, talks to people who remember James, and soon finds herself tangled in a web of secrets. An old friend reveals that James had been investigating something involving a powerful family in town. The deeper she digs, the more she realizes that James's disappearance wasn't an accident. As she gets closer to the truth, she finds herself being followed, her apartment broken into, and her phone calls intercepted. But then she finds another letter, one James had hidden in a place only she would know. This time it's not just a message, it's a map. And what she finds at the end of it changes everything she thought she knew about love, betrayal, and second chances. Sophia stood in front of the old lighthouse, waves crashing violently against the rocks below. The air smelled of salt and memories, and as she traced her fingers along the rusted railing, she imagined James standing there all those years ago, waiting for her. She followed the map's instructions carefully, leading her to a hidden compartment beneath the lighthouse's foundation. Inside, she found a small metal box. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing a stack of photographs, a tape recorder, and another letter. One that James had clearly meant for her to find only if she discovered the truth. The photographs were of men in suits, standing in front of a lavish estate. One face stood out, a man she recognized from her childhood, a man who had always seemed to wield quiet power in town, the mayor. She pressed play on the tape recorder. James's voice, aged yet familiar, filled the air. "If you're hearing this, Sophia, it means I couldn't come back. It means they got to me first." Her breath hitched. He had known he was in danger. He had recorded his final words, hoping she would one day uncover the truth. She listened as James detailed how he had stumbled upon corruption within the town's elite. Money laundering, bribery, even disappearances of those who got too close. He had tried to gather enough evidence to expose them, but before he could, he had been forced to flee. A rustling behind her made her freeze. She turned sharply, her heart pounding. A shadow moved in the darkness. Someone was watching her. She clutched the metal box and ran, her feet slipping on the wet rocks. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to get away. If James had been silenced, whoever was behind this wouldn't hesitate to do the same to her. Back in her motel room, she spread out the contents of the box, trying to piece together the puzzle James had left behind. Among the photos and notes was an address scribbled hastily on the back of an old receipt. It was a location outside town, deep in the woods. The next day she drove there, following an overgrown path until she reached an abandoned cabin. Inside, dust-covered furniture suggested it had been untouched for years. But as she searched, she found a hidden trapdoor beneath a rug. Her pulse raced as she lifted it, revealing a small underground room. Inside were stacks of old documents, more photos, and a journal. As she flipped through its pages, she realized it was James's handwriting. He had documented everything, the names, the transactions, the threats he had received. A sudden noise upstairs sent a jolt of fear through her. Footsteps. Someone was inside the cabin. She barely had time to grab the journal before slipping out through a back entrance, her heart hammering. She could hear voices, men speaking in hushed, urgent tones. They knew she was here. They had been following her every move. For the next few days, she stayed on the move, never sleeping in the same place twice. She needed to find someone she could trust, someone who could help her bring this to light. But who? If the corruption ran deep, there was no telling how many people were involved. Finally, she made a desperate decision. She contacted an investigative journalist from a major news outlet, someone known for exposing powerful figures. They agreed to meet in a public place. At the cafe, she handed over the journal and the evidence she had gathered. "If anything happens to me," she said, "you have to promise you'll publish everything." The journalist nodded gravely. I will. That night, as she returned to her motel, she found the door slightly ajar. Her blood turned to ice. Someone had been inside. On the bed lay a single piece of paper, a note written in unfamiliar handwriting. "Stop digging, or you'll disappear just like him." Sophia exhaled sharply. She had come too far to stop now. She burned the note, packed her things, and left town under the cover of darkness. Somewhere out there, James's fate was still unanswered. But she had his words, his truth, and now the world would know. And maybe, just maybe, justice would finally be served.